Welcome to the Calm Analytics channel. I'm Boris Tizengauzen. Today is September 10th, and of course the main news is the unprecedented massive attack by dozens of Russian drones on Polish territory. At this moment, new details have emerged that help us understand a lot. So, what was this and what should we expect in the near future? Not only Poland, but also other neighbors of the Russian Federation. There will be a lot of different and interesting information in this episode, so if this is your first time on this channel, be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episodes. So, it is already known that there were more than 20 drones. The wreckage of one of them was found 300 kilometers from the border, meaning it flew 300 kilometers deep into Poland. There is a reaction from NATO. Poland has made a request, the invocation of Article 4 of the NATO Charter, and whether this massive incursion of Russian drones could have been accidental at all, as well as confirmation that Russia has been preparing for this for a long time. Such incidents, drones entering Polish airspace, have happened before, and in fact there is already a reaction from Donald Trump and some European politicians. So what happened? I think you all have heard that dozens of Russian drones. So far I've only seen photos of Geran drones, but maybe they'll find other types of debris as well, entered Polish airspace coming from the direction of Ukraine and from Belarus. So they were entering Polish airspace from different directions. One drone crashed into a residential house in the village of Wiriki in the Lublin region. There were no casualties. Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk has already convened an emergency government meeting this morning. The population was advised to stay at home, to keep watch, and in general, airports were closed. Meanwhile, some European politicians are already unable to contain their emotions. Here, for example, is a German CDU politician. Bundestag Deputy Roderich Kiesewetter reacted sharply, saying that Russian drones are flying into Poland, flying into Moldova. He said it is finally time to respond consistently and firmly. Empty talk about peace negotiations must stop. Now it is necessary to provide Ukraine with Taurus missiles and large-scale military aid. After all, Russia feeds on our weakness. Statements about solidarity are inappropriate. Absolutely remarkable words about how Russia feeds on Europe's weakness. And judging by the reaction I saw today, well, that's exactly how it is. Here. Calling it weakness is putting it mildly. Let me remind you that today Poland scrambled its air force to shoot down these drones, because today is the moment of truth. If the response is just to summon and scold the ambassador, then expect much bigger problems from Russia in the near future. Putin is pushing through, testing the strength of the alliance. Let me remind you, all of this is happening literally just 2 days before the Russian-Belarusian exercises Zapad in 2025. Yes, there won't be tens of thousands of troops there, but as we can see, they're not even needed. A few dozen drones are enough. I'm almost certain that this provocation is just the beginning. Well, those who are now starting to repost the version that supposedly these were Ukrainian, some kind of reconnaissance drones reprogrammed in the air, somewhere over Belarus or somewhere else, they reprogrammed Russian drones and sent them there. Can you even imagine that? Or supposedly diverted them with electronic warfare. Can you imagine how that would even work? In fact, a bit later I'll show you evidence that Russia had been preparing such an attack for a long time. So, photos start to appear. More and more photos of these gerunds are surfacing. Here I absolutely won't be mocking or to say, well, you were telling us before that you wanted to drag us into NATO, and now you've gotten a taste of it yourselves. No, my position is simple. An ally of Ukraine has been attacked, an ally who has helped and continues to help Ukraine. So there's no gloating here. Well, maybe just a tiny drop, but really very, very little. From what I can see now, there are several photos of these gerunds in different places. Some are intact, some are just debris. If all of these were gerunds, then Russia was essentially testing Poland's air defense system and conducting massive reconnaissance. Why? Well, what do you think? And you know I probably won't be revealing any big secret to you. Ukraine has been living under attack from Russian missiles and drones for several years now. So, if a reconnaissance drone appears over some region here, and it might not only be a Geran, monitoring channels immediately post the following. A reconnaissance drone is hovering or flying over such and such region. Beep. Alert to missile and drone threats. In other words, the reconnaissance is being conducted so that later something can be launched at the target. That is, after a massive test of Poland's air defense systems. But now we, and not just us, have seen that they are shooting down very few. Of course, they only shot down 4 out of 24, even though they scrambled aircraft. Then here, there is some very, very bad news. Well, and US Secretary of State Marco Rubio received information about Russian drones. And yet another reasonable voice, this time from the US. A Russian attack on Poland is an act of war. This is from Republican congressman and member of the US Armed Services Committee, Joe Wilson. That's how it is. By the way, recently the former president of Poland, Mr. Duda, said in an interview that from the very beginning, Ukraine really tried to draw Poland or NATO into the war. Well, not because we are so aggressive. No, we just didn't want to fight such a huge enemy alone. Especially since Russia constantly says that it is fighting against NATO. That's true. Russian propagandists keep repeating this everywhere. But this is how it turned out. And there was no need to drag anyone in. Russia was the first to attack. This isn't the first time, but it's the first time on such a massive scale. And for the first time, Poland scrambled its air force and shot down objects over its own territory. These flying objects, previously both missiles and drones, would enter Polish territory, but they weren't shot down there. Why? There are probably 2 main reasons. First, they knew that these would just pass through in transit, so to speak. And second, shooting them down over your own territory carries the risk that they might hit a house or something else. But there was an incident when a missile killed 2 civilians, Polish citizens. So in this case, it turns out they were already certain that these wouldn't just pass through in transit. I mean, what kind of transit is it if it's 300 kilometers deep into the territory? And there's another unpleasant point. I said that without this kind of... I fully, wholeheartedly support Poland, and I'm grateful to them. But there's another not very pleasant point. Why were these missiles and drones that entered through Polish territory such a big problem for Ukraine? Because we also couldn't shoot them down over Polish territory. That is, it moves along the border, we can't shoot it down there, and it basically flies into our rear, or our flank, if you like, either the rear or the flank, and attacks targets. In other words, it doesn't actually fly over our Ukrainian territory and then emerges. That was the insidiousness of these drones and missiles. And back then we were saying, why aren't you shooting them down at the border? Even in Poland, Russian missiles flew 40 kilometers into Polish territory. But now we see that drones have outdone everyone. This just goes to show that they should have been shot down immediately and back then, and maybe incidents like these wouldn't have happened later. But the most interesting thing is, by the way, Erdogan didn't stand on ceremony when a Russian fighter jet crossed into their airspace and flew where it wasn't supposed to. They shot down that fighter jet without hesitation, but now it's drones and missiles. And now, the most interesting part, in fact, this is a direct act of aggression against a NATO country. So, how is Article 5 doing these days? Here's how it's doing. NATO does not consider the incident with Russian drones in Poland to be an attack. Reuters. That's what they're reporting. So then what is supposed to count? What should an attack look like? Several thousand drones and missiles striking the territory of a NATO country. Or what? Well, more than 24 drones are already flying in, and I'm sure they were prepared. Putin, after his visit to China, most likely got a carte blanche from Xi Jinping to erase whatever red lines were left. So, turns out, that's not considered an attack. But NATO believes that the incursion into Polish airspace was intentional. So that's how it turns out. And by the way, Wilson, the very same congressman, also added, I urge President Trump to respond with mandatory sanctions that will cripple the Russian war machine and provide Ukraine with weapons capable of striking Russia. According to him, the Kremlin is directly testing our resolve on NATO territory. So that's how it is. So friends, how do you think Donald Trump will react? He'll say that Putin is very, very displeased. That's the first option. Like in that show, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? He'll say that Putin is very displeased, but his patience is running out. He'll say that we need to sort things out. Let's figure it out first. And he'll say that very serious problems, very serious news are coming soon. But that will be soon, not right now. Any of these options, in principle. Donald Trump might also impose tariffs, for example, on Indian goods. Not all of them, but on some group of goods, and say that this is the 8th round of sanctions against Russia. And here comes the reaction. Donald Trump, leaving a restaurant in Washington, did not answer journalists' questions about Poland. Well, look, don't think that I'm attacking him. He didn't have all the information about who, what, when. He can't answer without detailed information, and maybe that's why I'm dissatisfied with this. I really don't like it. He might say that, but he'll get the details a bit later, or maybe he already has them. And by the way, friends, I want to take a moment to get your attention. Today we have an unusual fundraiser for our defenders, and it will probably last just one day. I think we'll wrap it up today. They reached out to me and asked for help for one of our defenders and his unit. They need a vehicle for going out on combat missions. The request came from Kharkiv, and the defender is also from Kharkiv. So, as we say, it's for the people of Kharkiv. Why is it unusual? Because this soldier with the call sign Pastor, his name is Ivan. He's from Kharkiv. He was in the territorial defense. From there, he went to serve as a sniper in the 79th Separate Air Assault Brigade. And then he suffered a serious injury. After a severe concussion, he returned again and is defending our Ukraine. And his call sign is Pastor. Not because he just wanted it that way, but because he really is a pastor. A pastor of one of the churches. And he is defending his homeland. And recently, by the way, he had a birthday. I didn't know him before, but I always check everything personally. I wrote to him, and after some time he replied to me, "Sorry, I'm out on a mission right now. I'll reply later." And then after a while he responded. We talked. Very, very modest. Extremely modest. And he wouldn't have asked himself. Someone asked on his behalf. But for my part, I want to add that Ivan, Ukraine stands thanks to people like you. Take care of yourself and come back alive. And as for you, friends, let's support this fundraiser. It's not that big of an amount. The link to the fundraiser is in the description of this video. The link to the fundraiser is in the comments. There is Monobank, there is PayPal for those who want to help from abroad. And if by chance you're not watching on my channel, there's a QR code that leads directly to the fundraising page. Let's help Ivan and his unit. You come across such amazing cases. And really every fundraiser, I always say, is special, truly special. But that's the least we can do for our defenders. So let's help them. And let's continue. Now, a very interesting detail. Did you notice how the Ministry of Defense of Belarus immediately responded and reported that they had promptly notified Poland about the drones flying through our territory, through Belarusian territory? And they even shot down those drones. You might wonder why. For example, when a drone flew into Lithuania, Lukashenko just waved at it. And that was it. But here suddenly they actually shot them down. Why shoot down Russian drones? Why does Belarus need this more precisely? Why does Lukashenko need this? I don't equate Belarusians with Lukashenko. Lukashenko is terrorizing the Polish border with migrants, basically creating an artificial crisis there. They attack Polish border guards and now suddenly he shoots down a drone? On the contrary, he should let them fly, cause even more problems. So what's the point? For Lukashenko, this was probably a shock, one of the most difficult nights. One of the Belarusian channels reports that last week there was information about a KGB special unit being deployed to Brest to control the situation in case of a collapse at the border. What happened? And the day before, a Polish priest was arrested in Belarus for espionage, supposedly because he wanted to find out about these exercises, Zapad 2025. So it turns out he was arrested by them. In other words, the Russians even had to expose their own KGB agents. Their own agent, so that he would plant this idea, or rather, not just an idea, but a real problem. It was he who gave Lukashenko the idea to arrest the Polish priest. So, this head of the counterintelligence department planted the idea, and that's why Moscow needed it. Lukashenko needs to cut off contacts with the West, hence the arrest of the Polish priest. Poland immediately threatened to close the border, and Lukashenko started having problems. That's why Putin's current goal is to cut off all possible Western contacts from Lukashenko. Especially since Trump is already saying he wants to meet with him. In the near future, Lukashenko will release prisoners. He's already done so recently. So Lukashenko is not just peeking at the West through a window anymore. He's already climbing right through a wide open door, pushing his way in. And Putin really doesn't like this, so he decided to mess things up for him a bit. And so the initiative of one of the KGB guys led to a major internal scandal with Poland. That's why now the drones flying from Belarusian territory into Poland are yet another stone thrown at Lukashenko. So now he's doing everything possible to somehow shoot down these drones, or at the very least to give Poland information that these drones are heading their way, because he realized, a sly old tuber, that one, Putin is now trying in every possible way to pull him back from the West by the collar. So in the context of this information, the repeated incursions of drones specifically from Belarusian territory, especially during the Zapad 2025 exercises, are something that can be easily predicted. By the way, friends, don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Really is, as subscribers rightly say, those who have subscribed, their hair becomes soft and silky. Now, about Ukraine. Today, the Pyre launched 415 drones, just so you understand, over 20 at Poland, but 415 at Ukraine, and the day before it was 810. And today the Russians launched 42 cruise missiles at Ukraine. And Zelensky has already commented that more and more evidence suggests that such movement, such a direction of attack is not accidental. There have already been earlier incidents with individual Russian drones. And he called on Europe, this is the main point of his message, I believe, to create a joint air defense system together with Ukraine using aviation. I don't think Europe will agree to this. Even if 100 drones fly in, something still holds them back. You see, does anyone actually believe it? The idea that more than 24 drones could accidentally enter Poland from different directions is just nonsense. I could believe 12, like it used to be before, but for it to happen like this, it's absolutely intentional. And why did this become possible? Because Putin realized that aside from threats and loud statements from Europe, he won't hear anything else. A big hello to Taurus. By the way, thanks to the German politician for reminding us that Taurus as well, someone promised to give to Ukraine. Now just imagine, by the way, I still don't know whether they'll find the wreckage of Shaheds there or not, or if it was only Garans. So if tomorrow a combat shahed, God forbid, hits one of the Polish bases, the Russians will just shrug and say, well, it was an accident, their electronic warfare systems diverted it or something like that. I'll say it again, this is a Rubicon for Europe, for NATO, for everyone. After this attack, Putin will make a decision about escalation. Just like Hitler, after the Soviet Union attacked Finland, realized that the Soviet Union was weak. The same thing now. If there is no reaction, Putin will make a decision and things will get much more serious. And here is the reaction. Macron strongly condemns the incursion of Russian drones into Poland. Macron has his own problems right now. Protests have started and so on, and he's being accused of extravagance. People are saying that while the public is starving, he lives in luxurious mansions. Let me put it this way. Instead of strong condemnation, give Ukraine a few hundred missiles. And then there will be no more factories in Russia producing these drones. And a lot of other things as well. You can't be such cowards, excuse my French. And now, here's the most interesting part. Proof that Russia had long been planning such attacks. Previously, Polish SIM cards had already been found in Russian drones that were shot down over Ukrainian territory. That is, they're used for navigation. If they need to fly over Ukraine, they also use Ukrainian ones, including 4G modems with SIM cards to transmit reconnaissance information. Polish SIM cards were also found in these drones. This was already happening at the beginning of July. And not only Polish ones, by the way. So this information was published by the Polish journalist Marek Budzisz, citing a received report. This was on July 2nd. There was quite detailed information there. Where were these drones shot down? And besides Polish SIM cards, a SIM card from a Lithuanian operator was also found in one of them. So, what do you think these Polish SIM cards are for? Why did the Russians go to all this trouble? I think it's clear to everyone what they're for. And it seems that Poland was chosen as a testing ground. Let me emphasize once again, there is no gloating here. The only appeal: let's unite, let's all fight evil together, because no one should be glad that a NATO logistics center, a logistics hub near Rzeszow, could be attacked. Aid for Ukraine is there as well, so this is our common misfortune. And now the possible scenarios that could unfold in the near future. That is, new batches of drones could appear, including over Lithuania and Latvia, as a demonstration, to show a lack of fear of NATO. This is what I believe. Or to scare Poland even more, claiming that it wasn't us, that they deviated again, and so on. If Shahed drones with warheads are launched, which might fall without causing damage, but will demonstrate that drones with warheads can also deviate or not deviate from their course, in this case, of course, they would not deviate. Therefore, Moscow will claim that it was a trajectory error, but this will be an extremely tough signal. As if to say, look, the next one will have a warhead and will go exactly where it's intended. That's if there is no strong response. And to ramp up the pressure, they might use Belarusian territory specifically. The Kremlin could simply launch a couple of combat drones through Belarus. Lukashenko won't shoot them down. And then there will be a complaint against him. Why didn't you shoot them down? Why didn't you report it? Wasn't it you? Why are you allowing your territory to be used? And so on and so forth. And accordingly, even more. Lukashenko will be pulled away from the civilized world by a leash. Possible responses from NATO. Yes, a commission will be convened there now. By the way, the president of Poland said that in 2 days he will have complete information, meaning they are now analyzing what exactly happened there, whether there were SIM cards or not, whose they were, what kind, how they flew. Now everything will be analyzed and he will have that information. So, closing the airspace over part of Poland and introducing permanent patrols, that is most likely yes. Shooting down Russian drones over the territory of Belarus or Ukraine, I don't think it will come to that. An increase in military aid to Ukraine, immediate delivery of long-range missiles, Taurus, 8 ACMS, additional Storm Shadow, and so on. Well, that's also doubtful. US sanctions, a new package of tough restrictions. Let's wait for Donald Trump. Possible responses from him. I've already told you. The scariest thing right now is the soft response scenarios. That's the scariest thing. Recalling the ambassador, a statement of unacceptability. Let's assemble a consultative group in Brussels or somewhere else, something like that. That's it. That means basically the next batch will be 50 units, and they won't fly just 300 kilometers. They'll go deeper. And wherever the fuel allows, that's where they'll reach. Well, today, the Prime Minister of Poland, Donald Tusk, stated that Poland will invoke Article 4 of NATO. Not Article 5, but Article 4. So what does Article 4 say? The contracting parties will always consult with each other if, in the opinion of any of them, the territorial integrity, political independence, or security of any of the parties is threatened. So in this case, it means we gather for consultations. After that comes Article 5, where they have to come up with, or not come up with, ways to provide military assistance. It definitely won't come to that. Without the support of its allies, Poland is now practically defenseless against drones, said the Deputy Speaker of the Sejm. Poland. Well, look, maybe. But let me remind you that to intercept drones, they sent 2 F-35s, 2 F-16s, Mi-24 helicopters, and 1 Black Hawk. Well, they shot it all down together. 4 drones. Poland has no experience in dealing with large numbers of drones. Just none. So of course you could say, well, then why do you even need all those billions and billions? Or how is it that you're defenseless against drones? Ukraine shoots down 800 drones and you only manage 20. Or what exactly were you preparing for? Is there going to be an attack on elephants across the border? Or what? Drones have been around for a long time now. Is this the most serious threat of war? But for us, we need to speak calmly right now. We remember, yes, there were various statements. Forget it. Poland is our ally. We are training mobile groups in anti-drone warfare. Polish mobile groups, Ukrainian soldiers can train them, share their experience. This is how we should act, in my opinion, because I think that right now certain sentiments will be stirred up in Europe, especially Orban. He'll pop up. He'll pop up now. I don't know. I'm recording this episode, and I think he's already popped up and said something like that. Maybe a bit later, like, look, we ourselves are under threat. We ourselves need an air defense system. We shouldn't give anything to Ukraine. No, we shouldn't. Everything should come here, everything here. We're not giving anything to Ukraine. I think this topic will also be stirred up, among others. The only thing is, they're flying through Ukraine towards you. And maybe it's better if Ukraine shoots them down on its own territory. That's the main argument. It will be. And another argument is that if Russia wants, it can launch 100, 200, or even 300. And through Belarus, for example. So that's how it is. Assistance, strengthening the union, closing the skies together. That's it, yes. And yes, the National Security Council will discuss what happened in the next 2 days. In general, history is repeating itself right now. If there is once again a policy of appeasing the aggressor, meaning Putin, then that is the path to an even bigger war. It's definitely the road to World War III. Europe is now at a crossroads. One way is to pretend that nothing happened. A one-off incident, it won't happen again. And in general, let's just ignore it, as if Putin isn't doing anything in Ukraine. That's how we'll behave. If we go down this path and even reduce aid to Ukraine, we'll run straight into World War III. It's inevitable. But if we just diligently roll up our sleeves, truly wake up and emphatically say, excuse me, that utterly mangy, despicable scumbag has completely and utterly lost it, let's just completely wipe out everything within a vast 500-kilometer zone, leaving absolutely nothing behind. All military targets, of course, with our weapons, but by Ukrainian hands. And show him that we can also send not 20 drones, but send Ukraine 2,000 missiles. In general, for some reason, I feel like I know which path Europe will choose. But yes, and the main point of today's episode, with dictators it's important to respond harshly as possible. And for all of us, those who want to live freely, in the civilized world, it is necessary to act together. To crush the balding jellyfish, and I want to express my support to everyone who supports Ukraine. Together we will win. Friends, take care of yourselves, take care of your loved ones, subscribe to this channel, and let's support the fundraiser. For Ivan, such an extraordinary pastor who defends his land, protects Ukrainians and his family, for the people of Kharkiv, let's support this fundraiser. Wishing us all a peaceful day. And of course, glory to Ukraine.